Zoroastrian named
Susvetno.
Golandun was returning home after selling some knitted woolen socks and bonnets to a rich family to augment her income for the child she was carrying. It was late afternoon, and she was in a hurry to return home before sunset. Taking a shortcut, she passed through a narrow alley where a Muslim was sprinkling water in front of his entranceway. When Golandun was about to pass by the house, he shouted to her, "Stop, Kafir! You cannot pass by this sacred spot. Stay where you are and wait until the water evaporates. I will not allow you to move until every drop is dry." Golandun was helpless and stricken with fear. The lane would not be dry for several hours, and evening was fast approaching. She stood quietly as some Muslim boys appeared and taunted her with lewd remarks about and mocking laughter. The young woman stood with tears in her eyes. As the ruffians began to threaten and approach her, she prayed to God with all her heart to save her honor. Suddenly, an elderly Muslim man carrying a cane happened to pass by the same alley and saw the young woman's plight. "How dare you!" he shouted to the gang and beat them with his cane. "Get out of here!" The man then consoled the frightened young woman and escorted her safely to her home. The grandfatherly figure bade her peace in the name of God, and Golandun thanked him graciously, comforted by his kindly manner. When Golandun narrated this incident to her husband, the Rabji, he knew it was unsafe and unwise to remain in Iran, and soon after made preparations to migrate to India. It was a difficult time to travel. Golandun was pregnant and already had a daughter named Dowla, who was not yet 3 years old. Thus, it was not until several months had passed that the Rabji and his family were able to leave Iran for India. After settling in Bombay, Golandun gave birth to a second daughter, approximately the 9th October 1877. A beautiful baby whom she named Shireen, which means sweet, pleasant, or gentle. A few weeks after Shireen was born, the family moved from Bombay to Pune, where the Rabji opened a small tea shop. Although newly established, the Rabji quickly won the friendship of many. The Rabji was religious minded and regularly attended the Zoroastrian fire temple. He had a generous nature, helping the poor and giving medicinal herbs to the sick. He had the gift of healing, and many who came to him were cured by his potions. The Rabji was also jovial and sharp witted. Once, while he was enjoying the company of a few friends, one of his patients came to see him, complaining of a severe cold. The Rabji knew the fellow to be a hypochondriac and facetiously told him to take a cold bath, drink sour buttermilk, wrap up in a wet blanket, and sleep in a draft. The Rabji resumed his conversation, having no idea that the fellow, having such strong belief in the Rabji, would take him seriously and follow his obviously absurd advice. Several days later, when the two met again, the Rabji inquired after the man's health, and the fellow assured him that he was fine after following all of the Rabji's instructions. The Rabji was taken aback because such a routine could have resulted in pneumonia. From that day on, he was extremely careful when counseling people about their health. The Rabji loved his little daughter Shireen very much. She was quite intelligent, and her beauty befitted her name. Shireen's sweet ways and conversation delighted her entire family. When she was 5 years old, she began her elementary schooling at the home of an Irani family. At this time, Shahryar was living with his sister in Pune. The dervish kept aloof and would spend his days in meditation and quietude. Occasionally, he would cause his sister anxiety by remarking that he was considering resuming his old life as a wandering mendicant. Paroja was a loving, innocent, and gentle soul whose love for her Sadhu brother was deep. She did not want him to leave, to lose himself in what she considered an aimless life. Paroja would often tell Shahryar that he should get a job, marry a nice Zoroastrian girl, and settle down with a family. But Shahryar would politely avoid the topic of marriage. He had not given up his longing to realize God. Although he had heard God speak to him, he did not fully understand the message. Broken hearted, but not broken in spirit, Shahryar became restless to be alone again under the open sky with his heart's sole companion. Searching for an answer to his profound dilemma, Shahryar earnestly implored, "Beloved Yezdan, what is your will?" One day in 1883, Shahryar was overcome with melancholy and gently told Peroja that the time for him to leave had come. Tears filled Peroja's eyes, and she pleaded with her brother, "Don't go, stay here in Pune. Why do you want to roam throughout India as a beggar? It is pointless. Stay here and get married. As your sister, I beg you, settle down." "But I am not meant for such a life," Shahryar explained. "I cannot marry. It isn't my nature. I do not want to hear talk about marriage any more." Peroja began weeping, and Shahryar was moved by his sister's love. He knew that even if he explained his deepest longing, it would not console her. But the divine voice once again reverberated its message in his heart. "It is your son, Shahryar, your son. Through your son you will know me." To put an end to this subject, and to satisfy his sister, Shahryar forced a smile and said, "Okay, if it is your wish that I get married and settle down with a family, I am willing to do so. Let there be no further discussion on this topic. But there is one condition. I should have the liberty to marry the girl of my choice, not one of your choice. And only if the girl I select is willing, will I marry. If she refuses, then you should promise never to bring up the subject of my marriage and family life ever again, and allow me to go on my own way." Although this was an unusual condition, Shahryar's determined, devout, and good-natured sister agreed, and inquired if he had any such girl in mind. Glancing out the window, Shahryar said, "Yes." When asked who she was, he pointed to a small, charming Irani girl wearing a white frock and loose red trousers, who happened to be passing by their house. It was little Shireen on her way to her lessons. Her eyes were lowered, and she was carrying a slate and a few books under her arm. "If I ever marry," Shahryar declared, "I will marry that girl alone. Otherwise, I will never marry." "Have some shame, brother, before uttering such things," Peroja admonished him, since the age difference between Shahryar, 30, and the girl, 5, was too great. Knowing Shahryar as she did, Peroja felt that this was a ploy on his part to avoid marriage and the burden of bringing up a family. He knew the acceptance of such a proposal was preposterous. No parent would ever give their innocent young daughter in marriage to a person such as Shahryar, who was not only unemployed, but was an ascetic living a pure life away from worldly attractions. Peroja tried to talk some sense into her brother, but he was adamant and steadfast in his resolve. As per the promise given by him, he was prepared to marry that girl alone and no one else. Peroja was helpless and had to give in. She thought, why not try? If it is in their destiny to come together, God will make it happen. Shahryar thought, there is no harm in what I have said, because, after all, who is going to agree to let a little girl marry a man of my age? He felt relieved that he had found a way to stop this troublesome discussion about marriage. However, just the opposite reaction took place in Peroja. Her determination to see her brother married, instead of being quashed by her brother's statement, was intensified. She hurried from the house to her friend Golandun, fell on her knees, and pleaded with tears streaming down her face. "Golandun, you are my dear friend. Today I have come to beg from you. Will you do me a great favor?" Peroja appeared desperate, and Golandun pitied her. "What is the matter? What's happened?" she inquired anxiously. "Why do you look so unhappy? Tell me what is wrong." "Save my brother!" Peroja cried. "Only you can save my brother and assure my happiness." Confused, Golandun inquired, "What is it you want me to do? How can I help your brother?" Peroja beseeched her, "My brother's marriage to your Shireen. I know how it sounds, but you must agree. I have come to beg this of you." Moved by her plight, Golandun, out of pity for her friend, said without thinking, "Yes, I promise." The two ladies embraced. Peroja's joy knew no bounds. She felt as if she had won a great victory. Bursting with happiness, she hastened home to convey the good news to Sheriar. My friend Golandun, the mother of the little girl you saw, has promised her in marriage to you. Sheriar's reaction was that of stoic resignation to God's will, and he accepted what had happened. He had made a promise to his sister. He could not go back on his word. However, when Shireen's father, Dorabji, came to know of the arrangement, he became furious with his wife. They quarreled for days over the matter, but there was nothing he could do, for Golandun had also given her promise, and a promise was not to be broken. Okay, why don't we have another reader? Do we
I
have a
can read.
volunteer? All right, Rosalie, go ahead.
Shireen, she had given her word. Besides, Golandun admired Sheriar and was not worried about marrying her daughter to such a saintly person. Dorabji, on the contrary, could not bring himself to accept such a preposterous arrangement. However good a man Sheriar appeared, he was not the type of husband he had in mind for his favorite daughter. Young Shireen, of course, had no idea of what was going on. She was overjoyed when the stranger put on her finger a shiny silver engagement ring, which she would show to her playmates. Sometimes she would be naughty, and if Sheriar happened to see her, he would correct her. Shireen would complain to her mother, "Who is this man to tell me what to do?" 9 years passed before Golandun's promise to Perosia was fulfilled. Sheriar and Shireen were married according to Zoroastrian custom in 1892. At that time, the bridegroom was 39 and the bride was just 14. Perosia and Golandun rejoiced, but Dorabji still found the arrangement unacceptable and protested by refusing to attend the wedding. Sheriar, whose nature was exceptionally good and kind, adapted well to married life. He now had a healthy and strong physique. In order to support his wife, Sheriar needed employment. At first, he sold cloth door to door. He served as a gardener, then as a cook, and later moved to a more prominent position as the manager of a bungalow at a salary of 100 rupees per month. Sheriar, however, was never interested in the world or business solely for the sake of money. The holy name of Yezdan was constantly on his lips, and he never vacillated under any circumstances. He would tell his young bride, "Whatever happens is all God's will. Whatever happened has to happen, and whatever is to happen will happen. It is God who does everything." Nevertheless, he knew he could not shirk his family responsibilities and dutifully carried out the necessary tasks in providing for a household. Shireen found her husband to be witty and humorous as well. During the early years of their marriage, Sheriar taught Shireen Persian, reading the Divan of Hafiz and the Shahnameh to her. He loved.
Let's see what the footnote
Yeah,
says. The Shahnameh is an epic Persian historical poem that predates the coming of Islam to Persia.
It's called Shahnameh. Shahnameh.
He loved his young wife dearly and tried his best to please her. And she too came to love him and affectionately called him Sharog. Shahryar had been a strict vegetarian for many years during his life as a dervish, and after his marriage, he remained so. In Irani families, meat is the mainstay of their diets. So preparing separate vegetarian food for Shahryar was a problem for Shireen's mother, Golendun, who did the cooking. Shireen was pregnant and in her condition needed rest. Golendun confided to Shireen that if she cut little pieces of meat and mixed them in with her husband's food, he would not know. Shireen agreed to this plan. One day she prepared dal with tiny pieces of goat mutton in it and served it to Shahryar, who could taste that it contained meat. His ascetic vow was broken, and when he was told that the dal contained meat, he told Shireen with a heavy heart, "Child, may God forgive you, for you do not know what you have done." That night, Shireen dreamed that two gigantic African men were standing over her with whips in their hands. One grabbed her and held her down while the other tried to force her to drink from a cup. Shireen looked into the cup and saw that it was filled with blood. She shook her head, screaming, "No, no, I won't drink it. I won't." One man angrily raised his whip to strike her. Terrified, she began weeping for mercy. At that moment, she awakened. The next morning, when Shireen narrated this nightmare to her mother, Golendun understood its meaning and, repenting for having persuaded Shireen to deceive her husband, said, "God forgive us." But from that day onward, Shahryar gave up vegetarianism and ate whatever type of food Shireen served. Wow. Merwan is born. On 2nd January 1893, Shireen, at the age of 15, gave birth to a son who was named Jamshed, after the Persian king.
Footnote: Jamshed, as well as most Zoroastrians mentioned in this book, was named after a character in the Shahnameh.
However, as she was too young to fully accept the responsibilities of motherhood, her older sister, Dawla, began caring for the baby. Dawla and her husband, Feridun Nowroz Irani, were childless and lived in the resort town of Lanavla, not far from Pune, where they owned a restaurant near the railway station. As was the common custom among Zoroastrian relatives, Dawla and Feridun accepted complete responsibility for the child and raised Jamshed as their own son. Some months after Jamshed was born, Shireen again conceived, but this pregnancy was experienced differently. From the beginning, Shireen felt the natural joy of an eagerly expectant young mother. She had been unprepared for her maternal duties with her firstborn. Whenever her sister Dawla would bring Jamshed to her, she would shy away from the baby. During her second pregnancy, however, she had matured and her feelings were quite the reverse. The young woman's heart longed to shower love upon her unborn child. The exact details and dates of where the family resided when their second child was born and during his childhood are not known. But some believe Shahryar and Shireen were residing at the time at 816 Butler Mahalla locality in Pune.
Footnote. In honor of Meher Baba, Butler Mahalla was later renamed Meher Mahalla.
The house was called Bopla, Pumpkin House, because next to its entrance was a large round stone resembling the shape of a pumpkin.
Footnote. Baba's younger sister Mani has stated that their parents were living at Bopla House when Baba was born. However, one early account mentions that Shahryar purchased Bopla House circa 1898.
Hmm. Across the nearby courtyard was a wishing well, which the locals considered auspicious. During her pregnancy, Shireen would often have wonderful dreams and describe them to her mother, Golandu, who would interpret their meaning. From the day that she conceived, the young woman was convinced that her expected child would be extraordinary and remarkable. Shahryar shared his wife's expectation. He would read beautiful ghazals, Persian poems to God, to her from the Divan of Hafiz, explaining the poetry's hidden meaning. Shahryar was a poet, and he would occasionally compose manajats, Zoroastrian prayers, and other spiritual songs on divine themes and recite these to Shireen. As to be expected, the whole family and even the neighbors anxiously awaited the birth of Shireen's second child. Shireen was more lovely and radiant than ever, and all anticipated a beautiful baby. The most wonderful event in 1400 years is about to occur, Age declared. God himself is incarnating. The atmosphere of Earth is surcharged, and it is emanating from a humble, narrow lane in Pune. In the early morning of Sunday, 25th February 1894, the long-awaited moment arrived. Shireen was lying asleep in bed at the David Sassoon Hospital. Grandmother Golandun was by her side. The midnight gong sounded 12 times in the distance. Nurses came frequently to look in on her. The expectant mother was relaxed in a deep sleep. Suddenly, Shireen awoke and told her mother that she had had a vivid dream. A dream? Golandun inquired. What did you see? Tell me. Shireen answered, I saw seated in a chariot a person as glorious as the sun. His cool brilliance pervaded the atmosphere. A few people were pulling his chariot, while thousands of people led him in a procession. Tens of thousands of eyes were gazing at him, enraptured by his divine radiance. I, too, was in the procession and marveled at the luster of his face. His light fell on the whole procession, and people's eyes were fixed on him. They could not look away. Tears of joy came to Golandun's eyes, and she said, Daughter, a very auspicious son will be born to you. His name will be spread all over the world. He will walk among thousands of people one day and be carried in grand processions, as you dreamt. He will be given special reverence and honor. Her mother's interpretation delighted her. Fast asleep again. The hospital was quiet. A gentle sweetness filled the air. In the silence, an unimaginable joy pervaded the hospital and its surroundings. Daily, hundreds of thousands of human beings are born in the world. but there is no discernible change in the atmosphere at their birth. That Sunday morning, the weather in Pune was neither hot nor cold. The breeze that was blowing through the town had a different significance. While people slept, the cool breeze gently wafted over them, soothing them in their slumber. Stillness came. The quietude blanketed the city, and it seemed as if all the din and hubbub of the world had been absorbed in a state of soundlessness. Age wished that this peace would be ever present. Then the birds started singing, piercing the stillness with their songs. There was distinct merriment in their voices. How sweet were their songs. How healing the effect of their chirping in the stillness of the coming dawn.
How beautifully written.
Merwan is born. Shireen's labor pains started, and a Catholic nun was summoned from her morning prayers. Golendun sat near her daughter, watching anxiously. Sheriar waited outside the hospital room, continuously repeating God's name. Yes, done, yes, done. The hospital's night watchman made his rounds. As he struck the gong 5 times, the crying of a baby was heard. Ah! The birds increased their joyous notes as if to welcome the child. And even the sun seemed excited, eager to rise over the horizon. Golendun emerged from the room. Sheriar, it's a boy, she exclaimed, beaming. You have another son. Sheriar was filled with happiness and immediately rushed into the room to see his newborn child. Pune was just starting to stir, as if the baby had proclaimed, arise now, I am the awakener. Little did people know that a day would come when he would awaken them from their life of sleep. By taking birth in the early hours of dawn, the child has signaled his arrival as the awakener, the avatar of the age. The relatives and neighbors soon came to the hospital to see the newborn child. They were overjoyed and admired the baby's beauty. A full moon has arisen in Sheriar's house, one person remarked. The joy that abounded in the hearts of all who saw the child was indeed most extraordinary, for the joy of that sacred day will last for ages to come. The atmosphere was filled with a wonderful freshness and spontaneity of goodness, and only Sheriar knew that the source of it was his child. With the infant in her arms, Shireen returned home in a tonga, horse-drawn carriage. The news of Shireen's newborn son spread throughout the neighborhood, and those who went to see the infant came away wonderfully contented. When their eyes gazed upon the infant, they felt peaceful and forgot their cares and woes. The child was given the Persian name Merwan, but his family always called him Merab.
There's an asterisk.
Marwan means,
Marwan.
footnote, Marwan means gracious or generous. Go ahead.
Shireen loved Merwan intensely and thought of him as her firstborn. The infant nursed well, and the bond between mother and son was strong. A few months passed of uninterrupted happiness, and then Shireen had a dream, which she narrated to Shahryar. I dreamt I was standing at the doorway of our home, holding Merag in my arms. Out of the nearby well, across the courtyard from their home, rose the figure of a small but striking woman, a splendorous diva, like a Hindu goddess.
Okay, maybe we should have another reader. Would somebody else like to take over here? Or
I
should I say,
can.
go ahead?
I can.
All right, we're with you.
She was rising out of the center of the well, and I admired her lavish green sari and the many green bangles adorning her arms. On her forehead was painted multicolored bright jasmines. In her hands, she held an arti, worship tray, containing flowers, burning camphor, incense, and oils. I stood motionless and quiet in fascination of her until she beckoned me to hand over Merog. The goddess implored me, "Give me your son, give him to me." Frightened, I held on to Merog all the more tightly, and awakened from the dream. I was relieved when I saw Merog sleeping by my side. After this dream, Shireen was further convinced of her son having an exceptional calling in life. Shireen's father, Dorabji, had been so unyieldingly opposed to his daughter's marriage to Shahryar that he had even forbidden Shahryar to visit his house. They hadn't spoken for 11 years. But after the birth of Merwan, Dorabji had a profound change of heart. He was so attracted to his baby grandson that he went to see the infant every day. Grandfather Dorabji would visit Shahryar and Shireen in their home, which he had never done before, just to be able to gaze at Merwan's attractive lotus face. He bowed to his grandson's sweet splendor, and the baby responded with much affection. Gradually, over a period of several months, Dorabji began looking upon his son-in-law with love and respect. Merwan was a very unusual child. For example, when he was 11 months old, he fell asleep in his mother's arms. Shireen put him on a blanket on the floor while she went to the kitchen to cook. After she finished, she returned to pick up Merwan and was stunned by the sight that met her eyes. Merwan was awake, sitting on the blanket, looking at a deadly black cobra just nearby. The snake spread its hood and every now and then stuck out its tongue. But Merwan was not afraid. Instead, the child was observing it carefully and swaying his head in rhythm with the cobras as if he were an infant snake charmer. Terrified, Shireen screamed for help. The cobra quickly slipped away. Shireen clasped Merwan in her arms, and she later related that he looked up at her as if to say, "Why did you interrupt my play? I was having fun." By the time the neighbors gathered, the cobra had disappeared. Even after searching for it for a long time, it could not be found and was never seen again. The neighbors consoled Shireen, assuring her that this was an auspicious sign of her son's exceptional future. When Merwan started talking, he called his mother Memo. Is that right, Memo or Mimo?
Memo.
Memo, and his
Mhm.
father Bobo. Merwan started walking before he was a year old. When do average kids
Year
start?
and a half. Year and a half.
Oh, okay.
No, it depends. Some some babies
I think
they
it's
start at
closer
9 months old. Yeah, it depends.
Yeah, but it's early. 7 months to 1 year is children can walk, but it's very early. So it's usually 1.5 years
One
before
and
they
a
do
half
swim.
is too late, but that's okay.
No, I'm working with
I think it's
children.
closer to 1, but I agree that 9
One.
is early.
His mother was pleasantly surprised when one day he stood up and walked to her without stumbling. But his new skill soon proved vexing. No matter what Shireen tried, Merwan could not be kept inside the house and constantly managed to escape. One day, Shireen became so exasperated that she picked him up outside and, taking him back into the house, tied his leg to the bedpost with an old sari. She put a plate of puffed rice and some water near him and then returned to the kitchen. Merwan started crying, upset by his loss of freedom, but Shireen ignored him and eventually little Merwan fell asleep. When Shireen, oops, when Shireen came back to check on Merwan, she found him sleeping. On his cheeks, tears sparkled like pearls. Shireen was overcome with tenderness for her son, for he looked so helpless, leashed to the bedpost, and she untied him. Moments after awakening, however, finding himself no longer bound, he ran outside to the lane. Shireen would often have to tie Merwan to the bed, and this continued until he grew to a more manageable age. Sometimes Shahryar would come home, find his son tied, and free him out of pity. But after he had played with his father, he would escape outside until a passing neighbor would pick him up and bring him back to the house. Little Merwan was adored by the entire neighborhood and doted upon by all. He had 3 maternal aunts, Mazis, Dala Mazi, Pila or Paroja Mazi, and Banu Masi, and 2 maternal uncles, Mamas, Dinsha Mama and Rustam Mama. All loved their nephew, and they would come to the family's house just to see our Murag.
It is most likely that most of Merwan's uncles and aunts lived nearby in the same neighborhood, in the lanes around Bopla House.
After working for several years in Bombay, Merwan's paternal uncle, Kaka, Kodadad Kaka, had returned to live in Iran. However, after Merwan was born, Kodadad returned to India for 6 months every year just to visit his young nephew. Once Shireen confronted her brother-in-law. Koda, you always say you can't afford this, you can't afford that. How is it that you can afford to come to India every year? Kodadad Kaka smiled and replied, I have to see Murad, don't I? I am his uncle, am I not? The boy's countenance was unusually charming. His sweet smile spread gladness in the hearts of all who met him. His face shone with delight. The child was so darling that even casual acquaintances were drawn to him. The boy's golden hair was so appealing that for 5 years, Shireen did not allow it to be cut. The golden brown locks fell to his small shoulders, and strangers would often mistake him for a European child. Although the boy was young, his mother had already started making grand plans for him. When Merog grows up, Shireen would often tell her relatives, I shall send him to England for his education. He will become a noted doctor or a great scientist. Merwan was a healthy child, except for one affliction. He had a sensitive stomach and weak bowels. He was not a big eater. His intake was minimal. Perhaps because of his stomach, he preferred less spicy food. His mother thought he ate the wrong things and would spank him for it. Seeing her spanking the boy one day, Shireen's sister Dalamazi stopped her, saying, Shireen, don't spank Merog. Cannot bear to see him crying. Shahryar never laid a hand on his son. He always knew that Merwan was the one God had promised him. As a boy, Merwan followed the normal course of life. When he was about 5 years old, he was admitted to the primary section of the Gujarati medium Pudumji school, where he learned the Gujarati ABCs and basic numbers. He stayed at the school for 3 years. Merwan did not like arithmetic and would complain about it to Bobo. Although Merwan was extremely intelligent, studying mathematics became a bane to him. One day at Pudumji school, during an arithmetic lesson being taught by Miss Ratanbai, Merwan had an overwhelming experience, which he later described. I saw a great glitter of circles with tiny points in them, as if suns, moons, and stars were being projected from those points. His teacher noticed Merwan suddenly looked dazed or dizzy, and as she watched, he lost consciousness and fell out of his chair. She rushed to him, laid him on a bench, and sprinkled water to revive him. After a while, the boy regained consciousness, and his teacher asked, Merwan, are you all right? What happened? The boy muttered, a halo. I saw a divine halo. The teacher could not understand what the child meant and inquired, Merwan, how do you feel? Would you like to go home? I am all right, the boy replied. I don't need to go home. But when the teacher resumed her lesson, Merwan sighed with regret, for after enjoying the Nur state, or the light of God, and experience of divine effulgence, here was this awful arithmetic again. I would have been much better if I had gone home, he thought wistfully. Once when Shireen was menstruating, she was taking rest and keeping aloof from the family, not cooking or touching anyone, according to the custom of the time. Merwan could not understand her strange behavior and would try to be near her. When he went in her room, Shireen would say, Merog, don't bother me. Stay away from me today. When he asked, why, Memo? Shireen replied, my tummy hurts. If your tummy hurts, what is wrong if I touch you? It is not good to touch me when I am in pain. Why do you touch me when I have a pain? Shireen became quiet, unsure of how to answer her precocious son. Merwan ran to her to embrace her, and Shireen, taken aback and upset, angrily threw a bunch of keys at him. Merwan ran away crying.
It was narrated by Baba to the author.
What?
Shahryar saved
Baba
his money.
narrated that story. That's what it said.
Shahryar saved his money and after some time opened a tea shop in Char Baudi.
The shop was located not far from where Hazrat Babajan would establish her seat in a few years' time.
He, Shireen, and little Merwan lived behind the shop for some months. They moved to Quartergate when Shahryar bought another tea shop, christened Cafe Shahryar, where he also had where he also sold cold drinks, sandalwood, and incense used by the Zoroastrians in their religious ceremonies. They lived behind this tea shop, also upstairs in a building on Irwin Road, which faced Quartergate Square.
Irwin Road is now known as Padita Ramabai Road. Cafe Sheriar is still located on the southwest corner of Quartergate Square at the intersection of Pandita and Ramabai and Lakshmi Roads.
And now it sells cappuccinos, perhaps. One day during this period, Merwan wanted to buy some candy, so he snuck a coin from his father's pocket. At the neighborhood store, he chose what he wanted and handed the coin to the storekeeper. But the man returned it to him saying, "This money is no good. You have to give me back the sweets." Merwan walked home disappointed and approached his father. "Bobo, this money is no good. Give me some good money." Sheriar handed his son another coin and, using a colloquial expression, asked, "Does this man want money that can walk? All right, take this one to him. This coin will walk." Money that can walk referred to the currency being in circulation. The coin that the shopkeeper returned was no longer legal tender. Merwan examined the coin, puzzled by his father's question. He asked, "How can it walk? Where are its legs? Is this a magic coin, Bobo?" Hearing these innocent remarks, Sheriar burst out laughing and explained the expression to his son. Merwan had a mischievous side and continued to sneak money from his father's pockets secretly. But he also had a generous, kind nature, and he would give the money to beggars that came to his lane, perhaps partly in emulation of his father. Shireen was disturbed when beggars started knocking at the door, and she complained to Sheriar, telling him not to keep money in his pockets where Merwan could get at it. One day, Sheriar hung his coat on a high hook, but when no one was around, Merwan climbed on a stool and took some coins. Outside, he distributed the coins to a few poor men who had come to the house. Sheriar and Shireen were watching from a distance. Shireen was rebuking Sheriar about it when Merwan came in. Immediately, Shireen began scolding him. "Why do you always steal money? You are a thief." Merwan turned to his father and asked, "Am I a thief, Bobo?" Laughing, Sheriar consoled his son. "No, Merog, you are not a thief. Thieves do not give money to the poor." Merwan would also steal sweets from the kitchen, leaving his mother wondering where they had gone. Despite her best efforts, she could not solve the mystery, and the sweets kept disappearing no matter where she tried to hide them. One day she caught hold of her son. "Murog, are you stealing sweets from the kitchen?" With a surprised look, the boy replied, "What? Sweets? Memo, you know I only like dal and rice and spinach. Why are you asking me about sweets?" He was so earnest that Shireen believed him. As a boy, Merwan was also fond of cream, which he would stealthily skim from the top of the milk pot. And apparently he liked it a lot later in life too, and he would have scalded cream, remember?
Yeah.
Mikal, why don't you read now?
Okay. He would always share, you read so nicely, so sweetly. He would always share the stolen goodies with his playmates. Incidents continued to occur, which reinforced his family and neighbors' opinion of Merwan's uniqueness. One day, Merwan was walking down the street on his way to a nearby field. Suddenly, a herd of large water buffaloes came stampeding down the street toward him. Shireen shouted warnings to him, Thinking her son was about to be crushed to death, the buffaloes charged straight toward him, but something quite miraculous occurred. Some spectators said that one moment the child was about to be trampled, but then they saw him sitting in the street and the buffaloes just avoiding him, running to either side of him. Other spectators claimed that one buffalo stopped suddenly in the street and hovered over the child, protecting him from the rest that were stampeding. Still others claimed that at one moment they saw Merwan trampled by the buffaloes, but the next moment they saw him safely standing on the other side of the street as the herd charged by. Whatever the true account, all were astonished by Merwan's miraculous escape. Another son was born at 15 September 1902, who was named Jal. Oh, I didn't know he was also Virgo. Shariarji and Shirin as they came to be called out of respect, were destined to have 9 children, 7 sons and 2 daughters. Of these, 3 died in childhood. A son named Shirmand at 7 months, another son named Jangir at 2 years, and a daughter named Freni, who died of the plague circa 1905 at the age of 7.
Footnote, Franny's last words spoken to her mother were, quote, "I have to go. The beautiful white horse has come." Merwan's sister's words are particularly significant since Vedantists affirm that the avatar during this cycle of time will be known as Kalki, the white horse avatar.
On Monday, 1st September 1902, at the age of 8, Merwan was admitted to the Sardar Khan Dastur Noshirwan Zoroastrian School in the camp cantonment area, which he attended for a year. In the Pudumji school, boys and girls were taught separately, but in the Dastur school, classes were co-educational. Merwan did not like it. He felt shy in front of girls. The very first day of school, when he went home for lunch, he refused to go back in the afternoon. Despite entreaties from his mother, he would not reveal the reason for his attitude. Later that same day, when Jamshid came home, he informed Memo that Merwan did not want to go to Dastu school because of the presence of girls in the class. Shirin Mai confronted Merwan, but he would not be swayed. When Bobo came home that evening, he prevailed upon Merwan to go back. If you do not go to school, he reasoned, years will pass by in vain without learning. If you do not like the company of girls, you can simply avoid them, but you have to go to school. So Merwan resumed attendance the next day and followed his father's advice. If an occasion arose when he had to speak with a girl, he would stare at the floor while talking to her. Merwan concentrated on his studies and took an avid interest in games and sports at school. He was a good athlete and especially loved cricket. He always gave his utmost to whatever game or sport he was playing. He was also a fast walker and runner. His friends nicknamed him Electricity. Oh, what a name. Although Merwan was not at the top of his class, he impressed his teachers with his moral conduct, and he was often praised to the principal and his parents for his exemplary behavior. Once after lunch, Merwan returned to school early. There was plenty of time before classes resumed, so he wandered to a solitary place and surveyed the surroundings. A girl in search of a friend happened to come by and, requesting his help, caught him by the hand. Merwan's attention was elsewhere, and a sudden appearance startled him. He tried to pull his hand away, but the girl held on tightly. Seeing that she would not let go, he gently pushed her away. She lost her balance and fell. The little girl cried and ran to report the matter to the teacher. who punished Merwan. He took the beating without a word. Moreover, of his own volition, he approached the girl and apologized for pushing her. The principal of the Dastur school was a European woman named Miss E. Chatham. Her affection for Merwan was touching. A day would not pass without her speaking with the boy. She would also invite him to her house for dinner, which was unusual since Merwan was so young. At that time, the Dastur school admitted boys only at the primary level. So after 1 year, Merwan switched schools. On his final day, Miss Chatham embraced him tenderly and imparted a few words of advice. Merwan liked his teacher very much. He listened with downcast eyes and shed tears at their parting, knowing he would miss her. Among Merwan's childhood friends were a Muslim, Abdul S. Ghani. Here is Ghani. Later known as Dr. Ghani. Ghani's younger brother, Abdul, Khodadad Shirzad Irani, nicknamed Hodu, and later Sailor Mama. Ghani's younger brother, Abdul, Khodadad Shirzad Irani, nicknamed Hodu, and later Sailor Mama. Hodu's relative, Bayram Jamshed Irani, nicknamed Bailey. Oh, Baba. What? They're all his family. Oh, I didn't know that. Mia Khan, Falkiwala, and several others, most of whom were of Persian descent like himself. Well, Bailey is Dr. Ghani's, do I understand? Bailey is Dr. Ghani's brother? What's here? Ghani's younger brother, Abdul Khodadad Sailor Mama. Khodu's relative, Bayram Jamshed Irani, nicknamed Bailey. No, okay, so they're all one family. So Bailey is from the family of Ghani.
Wait. I think it's saying Ghani has a younger brother, Abdur,
Yeah,
and Kodadad Shiraz Irani is another
yeah.
person in the group named Kodu. Kodu has a relative named Bailey. So Bailey's related to Kodu. But I don't think they're related to Ghani.
Ghani's younger brother, Abdul. Khodadad Shiraz Irani, Khodu's relatives. Okay, so like they're all in one gang. Okay. And several others, most of whom were of Persian descent like himself. They comprised his neighborhood playmates. Yeah, you're right, Mahi. With them, Merwan delighted in flying kites, playing marbles, hide and seek, gilli danda, and at night, a game called Nighttime in the Moonlight.
What the footnote says, gilli, a small wooden piece, is hit as far as possible by a danda, a wooden stick. It is played by teams trying to catch each other's hits.
Okay. Bailey recalls, Merwan was an expert in playing marbles and nobody could win against him. Merwan would often be seen engrossed in this game near his house. He would win all the marbles from all the boys in the vicinity. He would then either give them back equally to all the boys, donate them to the poor children, or sell them cheaply to other boys, and from the 4 to 6 cents he earned, he would buy some food items for himself as well as for his friends. Likewise, Merwan was also an expert in kite flying. He would prepare the kite string by himself. He would order friends to pick up pieces of glass wherever they found them. Collecting the glass from them, he would take it home and crush it into powder using a mortar and pestle used for grinding masala spices. Then he would strain this powder and add it to other ingredients as kind of glue and other powders to give it color. He would mix all this, boil it, cool it, and apply the solution to the string. He would spend almost the entire day in making this string himself. For a person of my nature, it felt very boring, but Merwan had a lot of enthusiasm in preparing his fighting kite, and he used to succeed in cutting his opponent's string the object of competitive kite flying. At the end of a season of this game, it is customary for the winner to rewind the string on his spindle. What is this? Oh, okay. But Merwan would break his string deliberately and let the kite fly away gracefully into the sky. He would observe its flight, enjoying the sight of the kite swaying here and there up in the sky, even though it meant, once again, Merwan would have to take another day to prepare a new kite string because of this gesture. As far as I know, the game that Merwan most enjoyed was Gilly Danda, whether played in the narrow lane of his house, at school, at Gymkhana, or Boot Maidan.
Nope. A Maidan is an open public space, like a commons. Boot means ghost, so at one time this area may have been thought to be haunted, perhaps because of some tragedy that occurred there.
Oh. Wherever he got a chance, he would start playing Gilly Danda. He had extraordinary skills in that game, not only in hitting the gilly and increasing the score of his team, but also in catching the gilly of the opposite team with such swiftness, in a twinkle of an eye, that the players as well as spectators were left dumbfounded. They would often wonder how a gilly that had been struck so hard landed in Merwan's hand. The surprising part of it is that whenever he started playing this game, someone or the other would immediately pop up from somewhere and join him. Other times, he would, without any hesitation, pull young or old, known or unknown, whether they knew the game or not, into the game. The other person, whether rich or poor, regardless of community, would be drawn to Merwan as if by some hidden power, and felt themselves as Merwan's favorite, and thus respected Merwan in this manner. This characteristic was visible in him from his childhood and is still there even today. Anyone want to continue reading? Mahu, maybe? Mahu, you feel like reading?
Mahu, are you there?
Oh, there's one. No.
Okay, Mona, you want to read? Mona, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Is Mahu not reading? Is she there?
No, you read. She's not answering.
So you
Okay.
could go.
Can you just tell me, like, from where? Like,
Once Merwan and his friends.
Once Mehran and his friends played quite a different game. Bailey continued. A table operator had set up his table between Mehran's house and his father's tea shop at the quarter gate. It was not it was not directly visible from either the shop or the house, but we could see it daily while passing on the footpath. There was a slope-side table standing on four legs. On the top would be a white sheet attached to which would be the British coins of that time, with small round 2 anna, 4 anna, 8 anna coins and a silver rupee.
The footnote says an anna was a currency unit formerly used in India equal to 1/16th of a rupee.
Fixed in a scattered and irregular manner, the operator would draw the attention of the crowd with encouraging words, tempting them to play the game and win the money. For 1 paisa, he would give his customers 3 round brass rings, each the size of a keychain. The customer was supposed to skillfully throw each ring one by one onto the table. If any ring fell so that the coin lay entirely within its interior, the operator would pay the player the amount of the encircled coin. The ring had to be completely encircle the coin. for the price to be paid, and no payment was made if the ring rested on top of the coin. Mhm. Several times, Meherwan and I would stand by the table enjoying the show of the players and others watching the action.
So this is Bailey speaking now, right?
Yeah, Bailey's telling these stories. He wrote diary.
Looking at this, we were inspired to try our own skills and powers. So one afternoon, when it was not so hot and the public was also less, we surrendered to this inspiration. Paying 1 anna, Meher purchased 12 rings and we shared 6 each. We started playing. Meher went first and did not score. And then I went but failed to score also. Joyfully criticizing each other, we left the place hurriedly. After a few days, once again started playing, and thereafter played for 3 days more. In total, Meher had lost 4 annas, but on the final shot, he recovered the entire amount. After that day, he never even went close to the game. The police raided the place after a few days' time, and we do not know what happened thereafter to the operator. Bailey described Meherwan's nature as follows. Meherwan was benevolent of a benevolent nature, and all his companions were extremely fond of him. He was our leader and acted lovingly toward all. He would settle any dispute among us amicably. If by chance we found him absent for a day, we would go to his home and inquire about him. In his style and conduct, Meherwan was simplicity itself. He did not have a tinge of pride and knew not what arrogance was. From childhood, he was straightforward and liberal, more conscious of others' misery than his own. He was devoid of family pride or craving for name, fame, respect, or honor. In his thinking, he was clean and pure, and from his boyhood shunned the contact of girls or women, keeping himself aloof from them. He was merciful toward any injured animal. And I remember once he found a dead sparrow in his house. He buried it with an elaborate funeral service and prayers. He was always happy and cheerful and succumbed to the wishes of those who inspired on his complaints. I never saw him find fault with anyone, and his sincere dictum was that all, in one way or the other, were good. He chose friends who had a simple and candid nature. Rougher boys told him to shun these others' company, but he would turn a deaf ear to them and continue his association. The one defect in his character, if it could be called a defect, was that if he was upset or troubled, never in his life would he confide in us. He would not open his heart to us and tell us what was on his mind. He always did not let any of us know of his suffering. And if he fell ill, he would suffer quite silently. On 31st August 1903, at the age of 9, Meherwan entered the Pune Camp Government English School. He attended the school for 5 years. It was an all-boys school, a beautifully constructed building located on Main Street near what is now Pune Drugstore.
Footnote says the school later became part of the Anglo-Urdu High School.
It was an old school, but by the British for students from wealthier families of Pune and Bombay. Your Meherwan entered, your Meherwan encountered older students and became a favorite of many. He had an outgoing, gregarious nature and was sympathetic and helpful to all. His companions loved him dearly and looked to him at the as their natural leader. He was such a favorite that many were eager to sit, eat, and play with him whenever they had a chance. Since he was
We,
so popular, several youngsters became jealous and, out of envy, formed a gang against Merwan and his comrades. How do you pronounce that?
comrades.
Right, comrades. Yeah.
Yeah.
Merwan, however, ignored their hostility, believing that today's enemies are tomorrow's friends, and he did not react to their antagonism.
Antagonism.
Antagonism. Sorry, say that again. Antagonism.
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 Antagonism, no?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Peace. This group was led by Merwan's friend Bailey's older brother, Mazd Omi, as he was called, was a mean-spirited individual who would go out of his way to harass Merwan. Once, while playing field hockey at the school, Homi's team was beaten by Merwan's, and the angry boy deliberately struck Merwan on the shin with his hockey stick. Merwan's leg hurt intensely, and had it been anyone else, he would have fallen on the ground crying. However, Merwan not only took the blow without complaint, but also did not strike back. Homi was deeply impressed, and though outwardly he remained Merwan's enemy, inwardly he started to respect him. Merwan excelled in athletics at the Pune camp school. When he won prizes in different games, he would always share them with his friends or teammates. As a boy, he was disciplined. He had fixed times for studies, reading, and games, from which he would seldom deviate. He would rise early and, after his ablutions, would pray aloud in a melodious voice. Merwan had been gifted with an exquisite singing voice. The neighbors would also rise early just to hear him sing. When he sang, it seemed as if the rippling waters of a river of poetry were flowing by.
Shall we stop here? No?
Yeah, definitely. We'll stop here. We're almost at the end of the time.
Bailey is
So,
a good writer, huh?
yeah, I really hope that someday his memoirs, his diaries, come out in a book because he wrote
Yeah.
quite a bit. Yeah,
Wow. Huh.
I did read something that it was being
Yeah.
worked on.
So for people who are reading God Speaks Now or the Nothing and Everything, just take into consideration how Merwan is developing his gross consciousness along with his infinite consciousness. Although it looks like he got it in order to descend, but little by little, it's evolved. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which three
Beautiful
diaries?
stories.
Silent word. Like Francis, Baba made Francis inherit three diaries, I think, which were part of the two volumes. We only have one volume of them of the silent word. Was one of them Ghani's diary? Is that in the
Ghani's what?
Francis inherited three diaries from Baba, and they were
Yeah.
supposed to be the silent word. And a lot of the stories are from these three diaries. Who was it? Someone in the silent word readings? Is that stated in the preface which three diaries they were? Or does it just say diaries?
Doesn't say which specifically, but I'm pretty sure there are some quotes from Bailey's diary in it.
Yeah, because they're there in the archives, I think. And
Is the silent word reading started?
I think
Oh,
it's
finished.
No,
finished.
it ended. we,
Yeah.
we we finished it.
Oh, yeah. I always make a mistake between that and another book. Yes, of course. I
And the
participated one
silent
or
word
two
too never got
times.
finished. Yeah.
Marvin, wasn't Ramju one of the ones? Didn't he have a diary?
Oh yeah, Ramju had a key diary. It became a book. Ramju's Diaries was a book.
Yeah, Ramju's
It's not a
Diary.
print
Yeah.
book, but there are copies. There are copies in at the center. And
I wonder if Ghani had written any. Dr. Ghani, I mean, he had lots of manuscripts. I don't know if he had manuscripts about early childhood.
there's a very little book by Ghani. It came out by Ghani about his I guess about his time with Baba. It's a very small volume.
I never
I
read
was
that.
trying
What
to
is it
find.
called?
That Elizabeth?
I can't find this in the. I have the first 5 volumes of Avatar of the Lord Mayhair that Balji wrote, and the page numbers aren't the same. So is
No,
it totally
the,
different
the
or what?
yeah, the online version page numbers are very different because there are no pictures included on the online version, and the book
Oh,
is filled with pictures, which creates big differences in the pages. Plus, the online version has updated information that's not in the original version.
Yeah.
oh,
And
Or
correction, a
some
lot of
things
correction.
are in original version that is not in online version. People who started modifying decided that this doesn't belong here.
They're
I mean,
not
I found
modifying.
things.
Excuse me, they're not modifying, they're correcting. There are so many mistakes.
Well, it is a modification in
But it's
my
a
part.
correction. And some
That's why we say
necessary.
original versus modified.
Yeah.
When we
But
refer
okay,
to
for
it,
the
it is.
reading group,
There
have
may
to
be
say
a mistake, but
goodbye.
Many,
who are
many,
we to
many
say?
Thank you
mistakes. Yeah.
all.
Who are we
Many
to
mistakes.
say? Are we
Go to
Balkalchuri? Apparently not. That's the thing against Lord Meher is coming out, but I'm so glad that we're reading it. For years, we had to talk about Lord Meher. I mean, there are rumors that Lord Meher is not even written by Balkalchuri. I mean, there's been discussion on Facebook. It's amazing. But anyway, Baba knows better, and I'm so grateful that Lord Meher reading is started. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, I read them so long ago. I'm really glad we're reading them again. But I never read volume 1 because I bought 3 altogether and 3 of them got lost.
Oh.
But,
You
I have
it's
some
wonderful.
extra copy of the volumes if anybody wants. I just have to see how many of extra volume I have.
Oh,
Because, people died and gave me their inheritance, 2 women. So in it, there were some Lord Meher and Wayfarers and other books. So I've got multiple copies of things.
so
yeah, so when you come to India, please bring for me 1 copy.
Only if I can come to India. I was talking to my husband last. I said, I don't know if we ever could go back to India. It's very unknown situation. So well, hopefully.
Speaking of inheritance, I don't know who was at the History of Francis Brabazon that I did at Jeff's late night, but I inherited all of these 3 talks.
Yeah.
And they're to be given to people is why I inherited them. So if anyone would like a copy of 3 talks, it's not a PDF, it's a hard copy.
Yeah.
Just email me at nadaom@aol.com and I can ship it to you because I'm sending out 3 right now to people who are in that meeting. It's fantastic.
Oh, that's wonderful.
and these are talks by Francis.
Yeah, there are 3
Very
talks.
precious.
The Mighty Beloved at the 69
3
Darshan,
talks.
then 1 other talk, and then a talk at a wonderful talk is the 3rd one.
Wow.
Yeah.